I am here today with Victoria. She is a writer, and she is going to be telling us some interesting things about our beloved Princess Diana. Mm-hmm. Victoria, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and what we'll be talking about today.
This is a narrative that has not really ever been heard before, and I have taken many avenues and have been in a situation where it's been hard to get out in relation to the said accident with Lady Diana and Dodi Fayed. And I think it's because this narrative has not really been heard in this story that there's something within it that's valuable. Otherwise, it would just be out there like all the conspiracy theories and all of the information you've already heard. This has not gotten out. And so if anyone deserves an Emmy for an interview, I'd say you ought to be nominating this lady. So this here is a 5-part memoir series, and this, what we're discussing now, is the 3rd book. And it's called, presently the working title is The Investigatory Notebook of Crown Victoria. And it's, the entire series is very artistic visually. The first book, it looks like a classified file. So, parts of it are kind of blacked out from when I was a little kid. Inserted images and snippets of stories and the like. And this 3rd one is like a notebook, like a police officer would have investigating anything. So it can be more creative with symbolism and different elements, so that people can bring their own decisions and what they're looking at. But at the same time, it's nonfiction. This is a memoir and it's nonfiction.
Okay.
So it's creative nonfiction, I guess. So this is a project for Lady Diana and Dodi Fayed, but more so for Diana. The premise is that she went into a forcible exile. And I know this is a narrative that's very different from anything else you've heard, and that actually is probably why it's so relevant. Royals prefer exile. They do not like regicide. Besides being highly illegal, it goes against the concept of being a royal, because the value of being a royal is in your bloodline. It's in the blood itself. It's in the embodiment itself. You can't just kill people. And they don't ever want regicide to be seen as a solution for anything, especially in a political climate where so many people in different countries, have been beheaded or different things. The British royal family has been very smart in the way that they've continued on in self-preservation and keeping the monarchy alive. But exile is always a preference. They don't kill other people in the family. But exile, that does occur. There's actually huge history of exile, whether it's locking people in the tower or, sending them off to a colony to govern where they're kind of like not any and nobody's going to notice them anymore, or they claim people are mentally ill and put them away. We've all seen these stories, tons on YouTube, or they'll just socially ostracize them. And now we're getting into it. And this is not a coincidence. The day of the accident, there was a quote from Prince Philip in a newspaper prior to them knowing of the accident. So it was already published that day before the accident had occurred. And he's the Colonel-in-Chief of Intelligence Corps, okay? Prince Philip. So, and that was essentially that to exile Lady Diana was the preference, but that to do so would be very difficult. Some actual quotes. And now he was exiled. He's no stranger to being exiled. He himself was exiled from Greece, I think it was, at the age of 18 months. His mother was claimed to be mentally ill. And there were issues, but they're probably partly caused by what's around her. That's what they do, them to kind of effectively, be able to claim things, they do things to them. And she was placed in an institution. Oh my gosh, the things that lady must have gone through. So he's no stranger to this concept.
Right.
Let's do this within royal families. Sometimes you make hard decisions, His wife was more so the one who would create and build relationships, but Prince Philip's a pretty tough man. It might make hard decisions for his family, for the monarchy. And that's where they always run into problems. Well, you have a problem when you want to defend the monarchy, but you're dealing with someone who's in it. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do? And now, and further to that, this is a modern exile. Okay, this is not, think from their point of view, this is not traditionally you put them out on a colony. Nobody's going to hear from them. She had social media. She had pictures of her everywhere. She was the most photographed woman in the world. So how do you remove her? It was more of a matter of removing her from the public, not just exile, but from the public. How are you going to do that? So regicide's not an option. Exile was a definite option if it was going to come from this side of things.
Okay.
So the thing is if it's an exile, it's a created event, right? Mm-hmm. You have to look at it from the point of view of, well, are there any symbolic elements that maybe point to this, you know?
Can I ask you one more question? Where was Philip's quote at? You said he gave a quote.
I don't want to say.
Oh, you don't want to say?
It was the mirror. This is a creative event, and so there's symbols and hints. And, you know, if it's done with any regard for the person, respect for the person, it's going to have that kind of production sense to it. Something meaningful is my point. Now, keep in mind, from film people's point of view, we have people like Stanley Kubrick, who the government kind of hired him to do some things, you know, and had to keep secrets. This is something that happens in LA. Dodi Fayed may just be one of these producers that does these things, who's hired on. Now, Dodi, as I said previously, his name isn't his name. His real name is Imad. His father stated that when he was little, I tried to find, well, then where did Dodi come from? Because Dodi's not an actual name. It's not a Muslim name. I saw into it. I couldn't Google. There's no Dodi anywhere. The only Dodi that turns up, and people in film would recognize this, is DOD, means Department of Defense. Whenever you see DOD in the US, that means Department of Defense. DODI means Department of Defense Instruction. So initially, we have now Lady Diana with DODI, and there was a fiat that was supposed to be seen. Now, this information was considered to be removed, and it starts to make sense. Everything that happened, it's like one side sets up a narrative, and the other side's going, I don't think so. Don't be saying that I said that, you know? So there's a fiat that was in the tunnel with them. And I said, well, what does fiat mean? And that's by royal proclamation or royal instructions. You had a DODI, had a collision with a fiat in a tunnel. It's under a bridge. That symbolically is really important as well, because every royal, who's like an HRH royal, has a funeral operation named for them that's named for a bridge. So for Elizabeth, it's London Bridge. For Philip, it was Forth Bridge. For Diana, they didn't have one set up, so they gave her the Queen Mother's, that's Tay Bridge. And for Charles, for example, it'll be Manet Bridge. So it's being at a bridge. Remember how they weren't supposed to be headed towards that bridge?
No, they weren't. No.
And for some reason, in spite of the fact that it happened at a bridge, everybody's being told to call it a tunnel. Yes, they've seen the tunnel, but symbolically, it's the bridge that was really important. It's trying to, you know, So there's a DODI and a fiat at this bridge. So I'm going, well, what's significant about this bridge? We're going to get into that. So on top of this bridge is the flame of liberty, right? People, they equate it with Lady Diana. Well, they ought to. It was placed there years before the accident in 1987, and now is owned by the International New York Times. Through film, they brought me into maybe 4 different cities, Masonic lodges. I've been in the Grand Masonic Lodge of New York. this is all part of this project, and just seeing and learning more and growing myself. And symbolism is very important for Masons, okay? And some of the founding Masons of the United States, being George Washington, General Lafayette, and Edouard de LaBoulaye, who came up with the idea for the Statue of Liberty to be gifted to New York, okay? So, okay, at the base, you know, the big Statue of Liberty, at the bottom, there's a plaque called a poem by Emma Lazar. It's called New Colossus. And on this poem, there's a quote, part of it, and you can see it on my Instagram as well, and read the entire thing. This is Liberty, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name is Mother of Exiles. Well, Liberty's name is Mother of Exiles. You tell me, if you were to create a symbolic epic gesture for Lady Diana to go into exile, to hit that place, that bridge, with that flame on top of it, for not just going into exiles, but, you know, Liberty's Keystone Tablet, it's a date of independence from Britain, especially. So here we have a flame that's a symbol of not just, you know, independence from Britain, somebody who's leaving Britain, but going into Mother of Exiles, who offers protection for people, right? You're going into exile, I'm going to protect you. This is what this flame means.
An additional symbol for the Statue of Liberty is reflected in the acronym Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation. That essentially means soleil in French, that is the sun. And I've seen it cited in several places that her flame in the torch itself is the fire of the sun as she enlightens the world. So the flame of liberty atop of the Alma Bridge is as well a symbol of the fire of the sun. And this is politically very relevant in relation to Britain, especially for a princess of the British royal family who's presently leaving it. But we're not even going to start to get into this. I cannot emphasize enough, and I'm wanting you to see what this flame represents, because we're going to get into a small bit why it's so extraordinarily important and relevant to this investigation. Now, there are a couple of other small statues from the original Masons and artists and sculptors and the like that are situated around Paris mostly. I'll put up a few pictures, like Colmar, France. There's one in that was in Bordeaux. And my work has become typified by the symbolism of the statue on Swan Island in Paris. Now, while my work is heavily based with the Statue of Liberty in New York, that most people know of, almost everyone in the world, she faces Paris, where she is on Liberty Island. She raises her torch of the sun to Paris. And the other statue that is looking directly back at her over the seas and ocean is Swan Island. Now, while the Keystone Tablet of the New York Statue of Liberty has a date of independence from Britain, the one in Paris on Swan Island has a date of the storming of the Bastille. This has become a symbol, no matter what I do at this point, of all these filmmakers and writers and literary writers, and it just grew and grew because of my project that is essentially breaking Princess Diana out of her holding place, wherever it may be, if she is still alive presently in some form of exile. The storming of the Bastille, of course, was a ground-swelling, grassroots movement of the people who pushed into the Bastille, stormed it literally, figuratively, and broke out the prisoners who were wrongly and corruptly placed in there, mostly by monarchy. What else could be more symbolic of what I am doing here? And hopefully what you will now start to be a part of, this being my first interview where I'm actually connecting with the public. I've worked so hard in mass media behind the scenes on U.S. studio productions for over a decade, trying to find a way to get this to the public, this way and that. And the truth is that it just will not work that way without all of you. Whether you give me another interview, whether you share this video, subscribe to my channel, So I get enough people, I'll make more videos that are specific to this. My Instagram, if you want to contribute to my budget, it is sorely required. They've taken nearly everything from me. I've lost nearly everything in life, including family, friends, my finances, everything for this. Because it's just, I'm this kind of person. I just don't ever give up. And, but I sorely have to start to connect with the public to make this move. I even went to CSIS, is Canada's equivalent of the Secret Service here. And they said to me, I know it sounds strange, but you're going to have to start with grassroots and move up from there. It's just the way it's going to have to work. Because we have to put pressure on these bodies that may have her in exile. It's not ever going to move. There's no politician alive, no person in Black Ops that's ever going to say this is a good idea now. Until the public perception is so comprehensive of this situation and starting to gain a voice, then we will have something. But why the mass media is so quiet is because with the US studio sets, every script, whether television or film and the like, requires permission and approval from the Pentagon and military to even be considered to be greenlit. This means most of the above-the-line people, being directors, producers, and writers and the like, have to gain a certain amount of knowledge and expertise to gain that approval. So many of them are in the employ of the CIA, FBI, and the like. So if you have a topic that comes along like this that may be contrary to the interests of a Black Op or an agency in the US, they are not given permission to ever talk about it. So I can go up to them. Producers know about me. They know about my situation. I'm getting pushed and pushed and pushed and heavily oppressed for it. And they see it. And it's kind of is very troubling for them, but at the same time, I kind of become the hero they wish they could be as well. As strange as it is, with having far less than them. And it inspires them. And so you'll see many of them have contributed behind the scenes. I actually started to become a mass media, not just a social media, but mass media influencer in mass media film and television, working behind the sets on all these films. Because I was saying what all of them were wanting to say and they never could. And so they would just feed me little pieces, and they put little Easter eggs in movies and the like, and little swan references and things all over the place. So that eventually when this breaks, you'll start to see it all. And so the only way to really make this move is the more it gains footing, the more you have a group of people who are sorely concerned. We could put pressure on a body like Netflix and say, put the blame on me, even if you had to sneak me in there. If they're doing this very strange reality thing, I'm a very private person, but for Diana, absolutely in a heartbeat. Are you kidding me? I have put my life out there. I've nearly died. And so that's not anything to me to be able to get what's required to put the pressure on them and remove the excuses off of them, so that they'll actually finance an investigation. Because MI6 equivalent SIS, the British, US, Canada, France, they're not going to investigate this properly, obviously. They refuse to for all these decades. They're not going to start now. But if you gave me a budget, they know I'm all over this. So I'm in a strange situation where I just have to break through, finally, and get that budget from one of these bodies and get them behind me, and we can actually get answers. Now, as said, I'm telling you all of this about the symbolism of the flame of liberty because location matters in investigation. Any intelligent person will tell you location is very relevant. If somebody, after they see this video, says, oh, it doesn't matter what she was saying, then you ought to hold that person to severe scrutiny, because there's obviously something not right, and likely they're stuck within the same gag order or silence or something that they've had placed on them by a body. And it's on all sides that this has been happening. But location, think of like if a woman falls dead in her ex-husband's living room, the location is very relevant. If a president of the United States suddenly dies on the steps of the Kremlin, you ought to be investigating the political arena around that. Yes? Obviously. And here we have a symbol of the flame of liberty, fire of the sun, independence from Britain, mother of exiles. Directly atop the bridge of the Alma Bridge, where the said wreckage was below. And you cannot have a more politically potent statement for that for a princess of Britain who's leaving the British royal family anywhere on this earth. And yet there has been a purposeful, unconscionable, if not criminal, severing of location from the investigation. Even the reporters that covered this accident were obviously gagged to silence on this. Location, I first learned of its importance in film production through Dodi Fayed and apprenticing with him, through the very strange way I had to experience it. We have entire locations department in film production, and it could go to the most minute detail of symbolism, just for those fans that really, really, really get into what a project's about. It's actually pretty creative and artistic at times, and definitely political at times. Reporters always think of location when they go to create a news segment. You will always see them place themselves strategically in front of a sign, an event, a speaker, a building structure, something that encapsulates the symbolism and meaning of what the news report is about. Here you had this imagery of this epic image and symbol atop of the Alma Bridge of this giant flame, where if you're at the angle of looking into the tunnel, you see it just above. And yet nearly all, I have yet to ever really see an image that was reported at that time with that glorious imagery, with the wreckage or said accident below. There was a purposeful severing of the location from the event that is nearly impossible if you really think about it. All of the reporters would want to take that moment and really give it everything they could to make it visually as moving as you can. Why did all of them remove that epic gesture that's atop of the bridge from their reporting? This is something I want to as well investigate within this series I want to create. I would have an entire episode just going into that, because that tells us a good deal of what was going on at the time in reality. The reason why that's so relevant is this. If you recognize the relevance and the correlation of location as being selected to typify and symbolize this event, you are recognizing that it was premeditated. If it's premeditated, this entire investigation was not botched, it was killed from the start. The inquiry itself and any of the investigatory bodies have been corrupted completely. It has been said by many who really saw into these details that the narratives of there being a drunk driver, the narrative of them being chased by paparazzi, these were somewhat created at the time, and there was a shifting of blame from this to that and deflecting. If this was a premeditated event, all of these points are irrelevant at that moment. Drunk driver, relevant. It's something to see into. It's something that may have some play within the way this was executed, but it's irrelevant. It's not what's behind it, obviously, if it's premeditated, if this is a staged event. Obviously. Paparazzi chasing them, same thing, completely irrelevant. What does that mean? The entire British inquiry was irrelevant. Could you imagine if this is a queen and her death occurred underneath this flame of liberty? People would have lost their minds. How could this possibly have been separated from Diana's situation? If it was Queen Elizabeth dead, underneath the flame of liberty, mother of exiles, independence from Britain, there's no way this inquiry would have been treated this way. Absolutely not. And that is what you have to look at. There's been a purposeful severing because they don't want to acknowledge premeditation. Why is that? That's what we're going to have to investigate at length. So if this is premeditated, we have 4 possible scenarios, essentially. One is that she was murdered, premeditated murder. And this was a site selected for it, most likely to symbolize that Liberty is dead, to say that not even Liberty herself could save this woman from her demise. Liberty is dead, there's her body, we've murdered her. I don't mean to say it to be gruesome, I mean to say it because I really require you guys to get on side with this. I know they've exhausted everyone with these different narratives and conspiracies and the like, but this is actual, it is very relevant, it is sorrowful that this has gone unacknowledged for decades, and she and I severely require you to take this very seriously and take it to heart, finally, that it's getting to you. So we have this one scenario where it's premeditated murder, but there are 3 other possible scenarios. If this is a staged event, if this was a created event, and if it was made to seem to be something it's not. Considering that we have people at play in this who have large budgets and tremendous influence, it is very possible. Within these other 3 scenarios, she's still alive. That's stunning when you consider the ineptitude for not investigating any one of these. So in one of them, she's been abducted. This is a ritual abuse, and it was a site selected to symbolize the dominance of the group that's causing the abuse, that has effectively abducted the mother of the future King of England. She's worth a lot of money herself to certain peoples. Any kids that they could force her to have would be worth a lot of money. Brothers, siblings of the future King of Britain, bloodlines that they can usurp for their own purposes. And don't think that this is not an option, because it's as terrifying as it is, it definitely is an option. And it's not something that should not be seen into just because you're faint of heart with it. 2 other possibilities are, 1, that she has been placed within a forcible exile. And there is a good amount of information to say that this is a definite possibility. We are getting into a small amount of it here. I do have to keep a large amount of my own investigation secret, or at least private, for the integrity of the project. But I think I'm giving you enough for you to say by the end of this that this definitely ought to be seen into more. And then, of course, the other option is that she went into a protective exile, willingly, feeling that her life was very threatened. And there is ample evidence to say she would feel that way. That was very logical of her and intelligent of her, not paranoid. There were many events that would call for her to rightly be very concerned for her personal safety, especially in light of her losing her security. That was questionable to start with. Perhaps she was feeling that her boys were at the point that they're independent enough that this was a possible viable option.
So the odds of hitting this was, if the entire world somewhere something symbolic of liberty like this, 197 million square miles to generously saying 1 mile. If you're talking land mass, it's 57 million miles squared to 1. Let's hit that particular symbolic gesture. it looking like so a coincidence. So then I said, well, wait a sec. Because I know when the Statue of Liberty was created, but this was during the Restoration that this particular Alma Bridge frame was created. And so it was under Ronald Reagan who did this during the restoration of the Statue of Liberty. Well, wait, when did Lady Diana ever meet with Ronald Reagan? So I looked it up. And as far as I know, the first time and perhaps only time we're ever together was at Grace Kelly's funeral. So when you see, and I think it was Diana's first event on her own, nobody else from the British royal family attended that funeral. She represented herself, and she was sitting beside Reagan. And I think that's when Reagan got the idea to create this ark.
At the funeral. Okay. And
after that, he created the Flame of Liberty on top of the Elma Tunnel.
I see. Okay.
Reagan with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, that became where she went into exile with DODI. That's American Department of Defense Instruction.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I got it. It's so eerie. It literally is very eerie, the coincidences of how this all comes together.
Well, it's no coincidence. So then I was going, well, where were they headed that night? Right?
Mm-hmm.
They went to everybody's saying, why did they go to the bridge? Why did they go there? Well, they were supposed to be en route to King Edward VIII and Wallace Simpson's residence that is owned by Mohammed Fayed. So here you have the world's most popular known royal in exile who's living in Paris. And she was en route to his residence under Mohammed Fayed with Dodi. And instead, they rerouted her to this symbol of liberty, Mother of Exiles, at the Alma Bridge.
Okay, when you say who, that's very ambiguous, right?
Being
who? You said they who rerouted her?
Well, this is part of the investigation I would like to do. Of course, there are obvious questions. There are obvious individuals who ought to be seen into. Let's just word it that way.
Okay.
That's why I really require Harry on this. I really absolutely do. Because, as I said, if his mother's in exile, I mean, look at it. It's covered with exile. You have Philip's quote himself saying exile would be preferred. You have DODI. You have a Fiat. You have the Statue of Liberty's flame of going into exile from Britain specifically. And she was en route to King Edward VIII's residence. I mean, come on.
Okay.
Nobody figured that this was worth looking into. Is she 60 years old? Happy birthday, my dear.
Yeah. You know? Now, let me ask you a question, though, because a lot of people will say, well, come on, that her body was at the hospital. Her butler came. And I know I know we've talked about this, but for the listeners, this is probably what they're thinking. And they're going to say, come on, her body was seen by the doctors. They were trying to pump her heart. Paul Burrell was in the room. He talked about seeing her lying there. I know you won't go into too much detail, but you gotta kind of give some information about that.
That was the question I had. Okay, and of course it makes sense. Now, wait, I got to preface all this now with the situation I had with the person with Dodi.
Okay.
In 1994, and this is all true, it's documented. There was a man who posed as Dodi Fayed, and it seems he was working on Dodi's behalf. Dodi Fayed was a film producer. Okay, this man had me apprenticed with him being Dodi Fayed. One of the things he introduced me to was Dodi's film Effects, the movie. Witness protection program.
Okay, that program. Mm-hmm.
So the FBI Witness Protection Program comes to a film producer, Dodi's a filmer, in special effects and asks him to stage a fake assassination in the public so they could take this person out of the public eye for their own safety. Okay?
Mm-hmm. That happens, yeah.
So from my point of view, when that accident happened, this is what I know Dodi most for.
Raleigh Tyler is an FX man, the movie's master of make-believe. He can show you 1,000 ways to die.
Great special effect.
But now somebody wants Raleigh Tyler to do it for real.
We want to stage a fake assassination, Raleigh, and we want you to supervise it.
Who's the we?
Justice Department.
I'm a special effects man. I deal in make-believe. I'd like to keep it like that.
We just thought that we might be able to utilize your particular genius to help us out.
Then what if someone takes a shot at me?
You are 100% protected.
A job that guy wanted me to do, I think I'll do it.
But someone else is writing the script and casting him as the killer.
I haven't done anything.
What if we put in real bullets?
If one person suspects.
Sorry, Raleigh. No loose ends.
Where the hell are you, Tyler?
He's going to need every trick from every movie he's ever made.
Remember my particular genius.
Son of a gun, you faked this out.
Is he the weapon or the victim? Is it murder or is it FX?
We're not talking about just she had an accident with Dodi in the tunnel. He's also producer who created a scenario just like this. I was apprenticing with him in film, and he wanted me to be his assistant on Effects, the series that they were going to bring to Toronto to produce. But I said I couldn't because I'd have to leave university to do it. So what you're saying is, but they saw her body. Okay, saying that's even true. That was one of the problems I had. So here's an example of a way that they contributed on a film set to this project. And it was one of the most absolutely stunning things I've ever seen, witnessed with my own eyes in my entire life. I'm just thinking the way I can say it.
I know what you're going to say.
Well, don't forget, Dodi was special effects movie.
Right.
So I'm on film sets, I talk to the special effects people. All I wanted to know is it possible, with their abilities, to create a body that was not real. You would not know it's not that person. So, they'd be working with prosthetic eyeballs and things like that. And I go, do you think, and I wouldn't tell them they probably know who I am, but, I wouldn't say anything. Do you think if they gave you enough money, you could make like an entire body? Like if you took all of your artistry and they're like, I don't know. I don't know if I could pull that off. So I finally was on a film set. I had asked this question again and again because it was so key with everything. And it was the experts that answered the question for me. We'll say a very well-known creative answered it. And I cannot thank them enough or offer my gratitude and appreciation for their efforts. It was the most stunning artistry I've ever seen in my entire life. So I'll tell you a bit of the story. We were filming in this very creepy place. I kept coming to go back to these terrible places because I love the ambiance for the filming. This is a former mental institution. It's a morgue, okay, or like an autopsy room. Okay, they've set up. Could you get any more creepy? Working in film, and they have it's a weird set to start with because on the call sheet there's only one shot for the entire day. Nobody's ever seen that. Like, what do you mean we're here just for one shot? Okay, they had set up the autopsy room, and it was a very small kind of like not just even a second unit, more like a skeletal unit. Like people were not really in on this. And then it was a closed set on top of that. Closed set is when you have anything that's sensitive. This shouldn't be a closed set, but they made it a closed set, which is very weird as well. Because usually nude scenes are closed set. Anything really emotional for the actors closed set. There weren't any actors in this. It made no sense, but they didn't want anybody else to see it. So me being at the front entryway, making sure nobody comes in, I was of the only, like, there's camera person, sound, me in the room. I think that's it. Everybody else, the director and other people were in the back, and all the other people besides the special effects we blood to leave. Okay? Mm-hmm. So I'm the only person. I got a front row seat for whatever this thing is we're filming. And I'm looking at this, I'm going, that actor, they're really playing dead, because we're setting up lights and stuff. I'm going, their foot hasn't moved at all. I'm going, oh my gosh, did they get a medical cadaver or something? It was so real but not moving. I was becoming concerned. I'm going, that's unethical. I'm going to leave the set if it is. So when I had a little break, I went up and I'm looking at the body and I genuinely can't tell. And I'm going, I went to touch it. Effects guy comes up behind me and goes, don't touch it. I'm going, seriously, is this real? Is this real? Because I realized, like, my heart was going, I'm going, he's answering my question because either they stole a real body and this is a cadaver, or I'm looking at what I've been looking for. And this is astounding work. Astounding. I can't even tell you how real it was. I'm up, my face is right up to it, trying to gauge this thing. So then I decided it was a cadaver. I'm thinking I'm gonna leave. I'm just about to go. It's the only set I've ever almost walked out of. I was so angry. I was getting angry because they didn't answer my question. And just as I was about to go soon, the guy on the table walks up to me and he's standing beside me, and I went, I am so glad to meet you. Oh my goodness, that's not real. That guy's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, isn't that awesome? But he didn't really know. I said, well, who are you? You must be an actor. He's like, no, I was just going through this department store and I was a big fan of somebody high up creative, and I went up to them and they said, I'm going to put you in my movie. And he said, can I stand here beside you? I said, isn't this weird? You're going to see them with your dead body. He said, dang, this is awesome. So the two of us, it was a close set. They told everybody to leave, okay? They brought in a real surgical team, okay? It was going to be done in one take. Everybody had to be perfectly silent for half an hour. I'm like, what are we doing? Okay. Him and I are standing there at the entry. We're the only ones allowed to see this thing. Someone, like the camera person, sound persons. Okay. And they start to roll. And they're told, just do it the way you would do a real surgery. Just talk to one another the way you would with a real surgery. And they said, sure. Started to roll. I saw them cut into the body, pull back to the effect of rib spreader, organs, sutures, gauze.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Absolutely answered everything. Stunned, impressed beyond words. There's no question. If anyone ever asks me, can you create a body that's going to make you think? They probably have an entire morgue with all of the world's leaders just sitting there, just in case for some reason it makes sense to have. I mean, it was just the most impressive thing I've ever seen. So then we had one more break and I went up back because I'm like, I got to look more. They had body parts sitting on tables, okay? Like my arm, extra parts. I picked up an arm. It had pores, little individual hairs coming out of the pores. Because you know, you pick up a fake, like rubbery arm, you're like, well, yeah, but it doesn't really feel. That's what made it feel real.
Yeah.
Okay, it felt real, and it had all of your little veins and arteries in the skin, like under translucent in the skin, all the little imperfections and age spots and all that stuff.
Hey, while you were speaking, I was thinking, Grace Kelly, when she passed, she died in a horrific car crash where I can imagine her body got mangled. She had an open casket. Diana did not have an open casket. She could have easily had an open casket because she was not mangled. They said she just had a little bit of blood coming out of her, I think her ear or something. She was completely intact. No one ever saw her body.
Oh, and there was weirdness about where it went as well.
Because they embalmed it. Yeah.
But there are so many unusual things. But when you look from this point of view, of this being a creative event and her going into exile, it all a good deal of it starts to make sense. So say something like that, just that. This is why I require Harry to get on the project, because the more he doesn't do it, the more it's getting ruined. But that alone, I want to find the person who made that body, create an episode, and I want everybody to be able to scrutinize it all they want. Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
More so for Diana, if she is in exile, you have to build an argument. You have to create conditions for release. No one's ever done this before. When they've had strange passings that people are saying, well, maybe they're still alive or different. Nobody's ever actively gone after it. But I've worked at it for so long, I'm pretty sure we can negotiate a release. You just have to be aware of the conditions to be able to do it. Part of it is calling it out. Part of it is busting the thing.
But they would never allow that to happen. I don't think they would ever allow that to happen.
But then why does this exist? Like, why was I with DODI as well? Why did DODI come to me in advance, knowing that this is a course I would take with it? Absolutely. It's almost like a backup when the time was right, was being created. Why all this information came to me through the years, yet at the time was not quite right. But now it seems it is right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there was that example of the Ukrainian reporter.
What was that?
Well, there was the Ukrainian reporters, Arkady Babchenko. He was a reporter who was taking issue with the Russians politically in a public way, and they decided to put a hit on him. And the Ukrainian government found out about it.
Okay. Was this 1994? Or when was this?
I don't have the date in front of me. Good few years ago.
Okay.
But he was Ukrainian.
Okay.
And so they faked his death in a public way and took him out of the public for his own protection. And it was when they were able to meet certain conditions that provided for safety. They had to call out certain things, take issue with stuff with Russia and everything. And they denied it, obviously. But just doing that alone was able to create conditions for him to be able to be released and reintroduced safely. And everyone cried. They cried, they hugged one another, they laughed, they were just beside themselves, could not believe this man was actually still alive.
But wouldn't that cause problems with deception with the public because they are under the false pretense that she's dead? Like I can imagine them being sued, and that's very unethical to do.
With what?
To
take her
to falsify something like that, to say she's dead and she not be dead.
Well, if they got word, if the U.S. government, say, like under Reagan, he created a new operation for if there was a situation where public figures got to the point that they were their lives were threatened. Don't forget, she wasn't under security anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. This was a different situation, what she was going through. And if something came word to them in their intelligence that she was compromised and it was that it was definitely going to occur, they could affect this operation. And I think that Dodi was working on this operation in advance, but he wanted a way out if it could be affected. That's why I wanted to make a series, not some little documentary something with a conspiracy. I mean, straight up, episode by episode, having the public go through it with us. Evidence on all sides, of course. If she had passed on, evidence on that side.
Yeah, that would be very important to show that side.
Of course. Of course, it's what I want, but I want the truth more than anything. But I also have a sense of urgency because part of that is that truthfully, this has not really been properly been seen into or investigated at all, or even recognized as a possibility. We may have a woman who sorely requires this. It's unethical to not pursue it. And to even, if you have to eliminate it as a possibility, then do so. But every time it kept going, more kept coming at me that this is possible. Not just that, it's covered in it. Like, I mean, it's covered symbolically in this.
Yeah.
So,
And that's the thing, though. A lot of people are not aware as to the symbolic nature of the things we see every day. That's just not normal way of looking at the world. So, for example, Washington, D.C. is very symbolic.
It's so astounding.
Yeah.
It's so expressive.
Mm-hmm.
The design. But that's what I'm saying is I went into all of this
Mm-hmm.
as a part of kind of that expertise of design and building
Mm-hmm.
and structure and symbolism. It's just, and you'll find that in France, especially. Think the Da Vinci Code.
Oh, yeah. It's everywhere. If you're paying attention, yeah.
Well, what's the way we would do this? Like, I'm trying to reconstruct the way Dodi would think about this. Think about this. If this was his father obviously sympathized with people in exile. He won an award with France, the highest level honor of merit, for his work with Edward VIII residents, for what he did with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we're connecting with people who not only have connections in France, but with people in exile in France. And Masons in France are particularly protective of people who have to go into exile from Britain because of long-standing issues that have gone on back and forth. And then there's the States as well with Ronald Reagan. It just all makes sense. info@archwell.com. Please, everyone, you can just give this URL to this video and get it through to Harry finally. I've been building this project, and we're only getting into not even 3% of it for decades on the behind the scenes on film sets. I've worked for over 10 years on studio sets, like NBC, Universal, Sony Pictures, Warner Brothers, you name it. I've been behind the camera, and people really high up at a certain level, they know who everybody else below that don't know who I am. It's so popular. Sometimes the developers are like, I'm going to sneak them in the game. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They're references. You'll see things about this project. Many people in LA know about this project and have been absolutely silent, but just brilliantly positive and backing it. And I don't think Harry knows the dysfunction he's causing. They're just waiting for this to connect. So hopefully put it in his face and don't let him, just turn his back on it or pretend like he doesn't know what's going on. It's the only thing I would say here is that there are two possible scenarios that came to me on different film sets, okay? For the condition she may be in right now. One was on the set of Smallville, when I worked on Smallville, because you have to know, when I worked on sets for over a decade, my name was Clark Phoenix, okay? Mm-hmm. Everyone knew me as Clark. I was the only Clark in the Directors Guild in Vancouver was a woman. And it just would give people a sense of my project, my background, everything I'm working on. Mm-hmm. And who I am. So I'm like somebody who looks like I'm just, this and that and trying to get through, but there's more to my story. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, well, they never asked me on the Smallville. When are they going to ask me on the Smallville? So they finally did. It was the only episode that had Linda Carter. And in this episode of Smallville called Progeny, Diana Princess Diana, right? Wonder Woman. You say that the most akin for namesake for Princess Diana. In their mind, the creatives of LA, right? And she was being kept in an underground holding place, somewhat in a type of a coma. And her Clark's best friend, because I'm Clark, but his best friend's Chloe. My family name was Cholette. So Chloe is C-H-L-O-E. Cholette is C-H-O-L-E. TT. Okay, so it's very somewhat similar.
Mm-hmm.
Chloe has been connected with this Linda Carter person who's stuck in this underground place, who motivates Chloe to go and beat the out of Lex's Luthor, on his phone. Okay, so this was the only episode that they had me on for Smallville. They would not have me on anything else. I'm like,
He told me where I could find her.
Can we trust him?
Well, there is an old abandoned hospital on Paper Mill Road, just like he said, and it's owned by...
The Corp. It's probably another 33.1 franchise.
I was gonna go check it out, but I thought it would be more wise for me to come get my army of one.
Get out of Smallville, sweetheart. Fast as you can.
Where are you going?
I have to leave.
Chloe,
Let me go, Clark. I have to leave town.
I'm not letting you go anywhere.
What's going on?
It's your mom. She's trying to control you again.
Oh my god.
oh, that was terrifying and interesting. Put a fire under my bum and wanting to really find this woman. Okay, so these are not the worst conditions, but not really acceptable conditions for an exile. Then I was on, that's one end of the spectrum of what people in high up in LA seem to be thinking might be going on. The other was 2012, the movie. Did you ever see 2012, the movie?
Yes.
Big disaster film.
Mm-hmm.
John Cusack.
Yeah.
Is it Amanda Peet?
I know John Cusack was in it.
They learn about it, but they're not on it. They're trying desperately to get on it. So what it is that there's a black op, and this may be akin to part of my background. There's a black op that exists that is there only to protect and ensure the continuance of the human race and different species on the earth. And it does exist. And there are many of these around the world. And in it, it's underground again. And the people who are the highest level IQs, scientists like myself, get invited onto this thing. There's like an episode of The Simpsons where little Lisa Simpson, they invite little Lisa.
Yes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. With her family, one parent. So my IQ being so high, it would be another reason why maybe Dodi would consider me, because I'm absolutely would be considered for, I probably am not. So people who are very intelligent or very, people with power can get on the ark and not really own anything. You don't have any money, it doesn't matter. Because they need the smartest people, the brightest people who are going to see through the end of the earth, the continuance. That is your asset. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You can't pay enough money for that. But in 2012, the movie, there are some tickets people can buy for $1 billion, over $1 billion. These are like Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, this crowd. So in terms of the art, Black Ops, I would be on par with these guys. You get what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, yeah.
So when they meet me, they go, oh, it's Clark. You get what I'm saying?
Okay. Mm-hmm. So your involvement with the higher ups when you talked about the Masons, like this is a world of
it's astounding.
Yeah, and I don't know, most people they may have heard it, but you're the real example of that hierarchy that people need to try to understand, because this is not an everyday thing for most people.
I knew. I was there.
Yeah.
This has been a huge learning curve.
Yeah.
And that's why a series would bring everyone through this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we would delve into that within an episode, but not an idiotic episode where they go dun dun dun.
Right, yeah.
Everyone. Some of them are just like the world's leading artists and thinkers, and very to themselves individuals,
Mm-hmm.
Who have very good heart. There are other things that go on that are just, what on earth? It's just, you see other stuff that's disturbed. But
yeah,
what I'm talking about is this intellect.
Can I just ask you a question? Is this what most people would consider the Illuminati?
I think that term's not been used properly.
Mm.
Illuminating, liberty enlightens the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in France, is of one of the only places, there are a few, but of the only places where women are seen as equal to them. You have these organizations that seem in some places, they are highly abusive to women. They, oppress them. There are structures that are designed to have them sexually abused, economically abused, enslaved, whether in the home or outside. And that, I don't even consider that proper masonry. That's just thuggery. That's just crime rings. That doesn't qualify in my mind as anything. But if you have Liberty, where she enlightens the world, she is part of the tradition of Masons of France who truly do value equality. And that is the large part of their aim, and to back people who have ideas that are ahead of their time, and the highest level of integrity. And that is what the basis of the United States was founded on. It was a partnership of this that unfortunately has lost its voice, I'd say.
Yeah.
But it is your inheritance, yours, in that country.
Yeah.
And that's why I would want women and men to come to know it more, because it's valuable and irreplaceable. What the United States ventured to do in this world was unique and ought to be protected and seen for what it is and recognized. And it's not something, we have a lot of globalists who want to dismantle things, but this ought to be protected. So this would be all within the series, and not in a way that would, I'm not interested in tearing things up and causing divisiveness. I want intelligence and people learn. So yeah, everyone would come on the journey. And but so this was an what happened in Smallville with Diana Prince. I was on that. That's one end of the spectrum. The other is 2012, the movie. Okay. So you could buy a ticket onto this arc if you're not one of these gifted genius scientists for over $1 billion. So in this movie, everybody's trying to get on this arc, right? There's a reference in the movie where the curator of the Louvre Museum gets into a car accident in the Alma Tunnel. And it says specifically on the news segment on that movie, it's so strange. It's this precise place where Dodi Fayed and Lady Diana had their accident in the Alma Tunnel. The Louvre, and you have to see what the Louvre curator was trying to accomplish in that film, which was to get information about the ark.
Actual clip from 2012, the movie, where they reproduce a precise accident and tell you they're doing it for Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed in the Alma Tunnel. It defies all logic unless, of course, they are fortifying my project and supposition. And I have worked on so many different productions where we did car accident scenes. This would only be in this film to make a point, for you to see just how easy it is, and it is, for us to create this sort of reality.
There are so many things to that film.
Wow.
I can't even tell you. So many. So what I'm saying is, as you have gamers, you have, developers who take gamers, put them in their games. I'm one of these people with my project. I end up in things, but I know where to look. But the more you get to know me, you'll start to see it. So I worked on 2012, the movie. I was working on this project. So they put a reference of what they figured where she might be in exile inside something that's actually very expensive, hard to get into, but really hard to get out of as well. Highest security black ops, and no one's ever going to breathe the word that you're in there. So that's their take on it.
Wow.
So this is why, please, again, email this to Prince Harry. So stop ruining this project. So that it's important. I mean, it's very important. So, the worst thing in the world for her is the point. They may have had really good intent and put her somewhere, very fortified. But at the same time, she has to have justice, and she's a woman with a voice, and you can't just have situations that are treating women in this way in the world.
Mm-hmm. Very, yeah. Now, what did you want to go deeper into next time we speak? I mean, I think you mentioned that you said the next time. What were you referring to?
I know I was going on. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
To get into it. Just to explain this person who posed as Dodi Fayed, who seemed to be working for him at arm's length. So just where I started in this entire situation, and why it just solidifies the perspective that there were things going on before the accident around this person, Dodi, that speak to this actually being a very viable solution or outcome that had happened with this said accident. There are just too many questionable events that happened before. So I couldn't really get into them because once I start that story,
yeah, you have to really go into the details. I think it's a lot to grasp, you know.
I know. And I hope that I did well enough because this is a story that's been sitting there for decades. So
yeah, I've never heard it in all the books that I have on her. No. You've never heard this one.
But the timing may be right because Harry's kind of broken off. You know, there may be certain shiftings within the monarchy.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the reason why.
Mm-hmm.
This is finally coming out.
Wow. Wow.
Nominate you for an award. I'm not kidding.
How long have you been trying to get this out again?
I'm so stuck in every way. Since the moment I first started to see what might be happening, what may have actually been the truth in this. And it's been a gamut. You cannot even, but within that, I seem to be in my own little project, which is just growing and growing and growing. I mean, these experiences I had on these film sets are so, you'd think you'd be able to cry from the rooftop, you know?
Well, you've got such a wide variety of a background in the industry. What about some of the producers and people you have talked to or could ask to get to know?
Just recall back how many people who said, you know, probably knew Dodi. He worked on Hook with Steven Spielberg. He worked with George Lucas. How many of them, when the accident happened, came forth and gave interviews?
Yeah, nobody.
Yeah, I'm the safe person they could talk to in this situation. They knew that. As long as I'm kind of quiet. They couldn't go to the British, anything, any of the SIS, anything. And they couldn't really go to Mohammed Syed, you know, necessarily. But
could you go to him?
I've attempted to connect with Mohammed a couple of times, but I haven't pushed it because I knew it either moves or it doesn't. And I don't want to ruin this project. What my feeling always was is it's going to take a family. There's a kind of logic in it. If you're trying to negotiate a release, if there is a person to negotiate a release, you have to create a conditions for them to be released too. You have to provide their safety. Say if she's on something like that Black Op with that, you have to provide safety as better. You have to provide an argument. She has family. Well, who could that be presently who's a safe family? You have to provide a very weighted argument for the release. We'd have to look into whether there are legalities. Say in past situations with other people who were placed in exile or institutionalized, what are within the monarchy, the legal, what's on paper where they can actually do this? What is the strategy in a legal team to say, let's build an argument? What if theoretically she's been placed away? What are the legally has to be made and dealt with?
To be honest with you, I don't think that they would even allow it to happen, to negotiate, because the can of worms you're opening with the revelation of this would be enormous.
True. But the people that laid out the symbolism did so for a reason. I would think. You can call them on it. But I think you have to be prepared, like that situation with that reporter. You have to one, know the person's still alive. Then you have to also take on creating a safe environment within certain conditions for that release. And so these are things I have not had the budget, is my point. Well, there you are. I'm going to leave it there. If you want to talk once more in relation to what I experienced with this other Dodi.
Yeah, I think we could follow it up. I think there are options or things that you're saying that sound very plausible, but there's still a lot of questions. A lot of questions. Ton of questions. And
at least there are questions that are new ground.
And it'd be nice to be able to ask you those questions, to give you things to think about, to really flesh out some things, because we would want to know. And not only that, but I think there's so much that people don't know and see, like I said, with the Masons. My uncle talks about the Masons all the time. And it's something that I've been very interested in. But the average person, if this came to light, let's say what you're saying is true, right? This coming to light would have devastating effects.
But don't forget, it's not just Masons. This is like George Washington Masonry. You know George Washington.
Yes.
He's not necessarily a person that people go, oh, it's not, it's in the light.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah,
it's not fighting it.
Right.
It's being truthful.
And I can see being truthful, but it would have devastating effects on people that should probably say, I don't want to know the truth. Like, what if people don't want to know the truth? I'm just thinking out loud. I'm just giving you something to bounce off of.
You're completely true. You're right. But when I looked at it and they go, well, Prince Philip has a quote right there saying he prefers exile. There's DODI. There's a Fiat. That's it. I'm out. If you're at that level, you might just back out and go, no, that's way above my everything.
Exactly. The realization is a lot to handle. It's a lot to handle for some people.
And I've been through this. That's what I'm saying, is I've taken it all on. I was a mother on my own, bringing my daughter into the Grand Masonic Lodge of New York City.
Oh, gosh.
I mean, I've been through everything. It was fascinating. It was not but you could imagine it at first. It's terrifying. You're a woman. You're going, beyond the leap of faith.
Yeah, it gets kind of scary too, I think.
You have no idea. And maybe that's why Dodi selected me.
Hey,
all I could figure.
You never know. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you're a strong woman. Very strong.
Everything around me is just a big, just a giant knotted mess. Really just pull me out,
Yeah.
There's always something that's there. So I'm here. So if you like, we can talk about the two Dodis.
Okay, and if there's anything else, it was a pleasure speaking with you, and I thank you for meeting with me. And until next time, we will talk about the two Dodis. That should be pretty interesting.
It is.
Okay.
I appreciate it. You have a lovely day, dear.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.